Hello, friends. My family and I just had an adventure to go see the eclipse. And as you might imagine, it was about much more than an eclipse for us. So if you'd like to hear about our story today, I would invite you to settle in. I will share some thoughts, some inspirations, and some lessons that we learned along the way. We really weren't sure if we were going to go and see the eclipse. We were very, very glad that we did. A friend of ours that accompanied us said that he had some relatives that lived about an hour away from getting within the path of totality and decided not to go or just didn't seem interested. And of course, this life is full of so many things that we can choose to put our attention to. For us, it was a much longer drive than a few hours, and so we had to make a decision. Will this be worth the time and energy that we put into this big adventure? And in the end, wow, the whole thing was great. Now, this was probably one of the first lessons because, believe it or not, I can be a bit of a homebody. And the thought of packing up and taking our vehicle for, 4, 5, 6 day adventure can just feel like a lot. Especially when we live here at Goldenwood, there's so many things not only that I appreciate about living here, but also so many things to do to upkeep the grounds, feeding the birds, getting gardens ready. So there's always this part of me that feels a little bit torn to go on an adventure like this or just to stay home. We went on this journey with friends. We were traveling with some good friends, and then we were meeting a very good friend of ours who you probably know, Brett, on the way back up because he was down south. So we were all going to rendezvous, but we didn't know where we were going to rendezvous. We wanted to watch the weather, and we also wanted to just have it be a bit adventurous. Instead of having every step of the trip planned out, we just knew that we were going to go down there and try to find a place to camp and a place to watch. And for me, sometimes I think there's something to just letting go into the world like that. When you do that with an attitude of playfulness and fun, well, we found that everything often ends up almost kind of charmed. And that's what happened here. We ended up going into this area of a national forest, the Shawnee National Forest, that I thought would be a good place where there's these rocky outcrops where maybe we could get up on top of some rocks and observe from there. Quiet, not a lot of people, us, nature, and the eclipse. Well, after many adventures, some of which I will share here in this video, we got down to this area that I thought would be right, and it just wasn't right. I started talking to some of the law enforcement officers down there. There were a lot of rangers and law enforcement officers, and so I started striking up some conversations. And I find often that talking to people, especially in a world where we can be tempted to do everything online on our phones, talking to people will bring gifts that we just can't get through our devices. So this ranger said, well, there's this road in this area where most people travel into the national forest. He said, but there's this other road along this levee, and that really, even though it's very close to the other road, people just don't know about it, don't think about it, because it doesn't lead anywhere in the same way. He said, I think that would be a really good place to put yourself and your family to see things. And what I didn't know is that apparently it was also the plan of some of the National Forest Park Rangers to go there themselves because they knew that this would be a good spot. We followed this guy's advice and found this place, and it was just us. So we set up our camps, and there was this beautiful open view of the sky. And of course, the weather was super cooperative for us and blessed us with big, wide open blue skies on the day of the eclipse. When we looked around ourselves the next morning, there really weren't that many people. A few more people had filtered in. And right down the way was this guy that had this super cool overlander rig. And it struck me as unusual because he had these sort of metal grills that came out over the front and the sides and the back of his car. So I went over to, of course, strike up a conversation. And here's where the magic happens again. So this guy, first of all, introduced himself as a storm chaser. His car was battered by hail damage, and those metal grates were overlapping his windows so that he didn't lose windows when he would go and do his tornado chasing and storm chasing. Well, it ends up that he's a photographer for the Forest Service, and he's here hired by the Forest Service to take pictures of the eclipse and the people. So, so again, we found ourselves feeling pretty blessed that here we were in this place where this professional photographer hired by the Forest Service was camping out right next to us. Obviously a good place to observe the eclipse. He said that he would take some video footage of our family and our reaction to everything and take some obviously incredible pictures and video of the eclipse itself, and he would share these with us. So we didn't feel like we had to mess around with camera equipment at all. We could just be present for the eclipse. And here's another important lesson that we got from the eclipse. Because so many people tried to tell us how amazing an eclipse is. And like so many things in life, words just don't do it. I could go on and on. There's this black hole in the sky. It's amazing, the corona around it, the feeling and sensations that you have. But in the end, I'm just trying to describe something in words that nothing will describe. I'm going to say, for all of you watching, if you ever get a chance to see a total eclipse, do it. It is mind-blowing and soul-expanding. And Becca and I just burst into tears. It was so powerful. We've heard that, if you're in crowds, that people cheer, they shout, cry, all kinds of things happen. Except for our little group, all the people around us were kind of just silent in awe. There weren't a lot of people there, as I said. This one guy that had come up, he arrived in a Tesla and parked next to us, and he had wanted to come up with some friends, but ended up just having to come up by himself. So it's almost like he adopted our family a little bit, because he just he had a little folding camping chair and he put it right next to our group and didn't ask, but must have sensed that we were fine with it, and we were. And so he kind of became part of our viewing group, and he, like us, was just really present there for the whole experience. We sat there in awe. There's so many things that happen. It's not just the eclipse, the way the shadows play and ripple on the ground like the bottom of the ocean, the way that the light goes through pinhole or the weaving of your fingers to form little half moon eclipse shapes on the ground, looking up through the glasses and seeing the sun get smaller, 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 realizing that even when there's the tiniest sliver of the sun barely there, you can't look up at it. It's so bright. That's how powerful our star is. And then when the eclipse comes, it's so sudden. Suddenly, boom, it's there. And I've seen partial eclipses before, which were nothing like this. They're cool, it's neat, things get darker, and you can look up and you can see that little sliver, but 99, not at all the same as 100%. Because when that goes over the sun, the moon covers it up, and there's this black hole in the sky and the corona of the sun around it. And in this case, there was a huge solar flare coming out the bottom part. So there's this pink glow and you could see the solar flare coming out. unbelievable. And you're just there in awe of this thing that happens that's so unlikely. Our friend Brett was saying, we have to realize it's kind of unusual that we would have a sun and a moon on our planet that just happen to be relative to each other in appearance. So that when the moon goes over it, if you can imagine, if the moon was much bigger in an appearance or relative size, then when it covered up the sun, we wouldn't see that corona around it. We'd have probably more eclipses, but they wouldn't have that same effect. And if the moon was any smaller relative, then we would never be able to look up at it because it wouldn't block out the whole sun. But it's just perfect size where it blocks it off but leaves the corona visible. And all these unusual, kind of almost suspiciously amazing things that line up to create this unbelievable experience that is not probably unique to our planet in the universe, but is probably kind of special and unusual. And then on the other end, the sun suddenly comes out. And again, it's so sudden that you go from that 100% to that 99%, and it's kind of a burst of light that appears in the sun, and you can't look up at it anymore. And the experience isn't over then. I mean, there's the whole unfolding of everything that got folded up in the beginning of this experience. A lot of people just left after that. The grand spectacle was over, but we stayed for the whole thing unfolding and got to experience it all in reverse. There's a couple little anecdotes that I would like to share about our experience on the way down. And each of these held a lesson for me. The first had to do with that guy in the Tesla. He was talking about, we were talking about electric vehicles and how his trip was and such things as that. And I said, well, when Teslas first came out, I had a friend that purchased one, and she took me out on a back road. And I guess this wasn't when they first came out, but when they were still really expensive and the first more modern ones came out. And she put her foot on the gas, and I felt like I was taking off in a jet. I was slammed back into my seat so hard. It was very, very impressive, the acceleration. And I said, so, wow, it must be pretty fun to drive. And he said, well, really, Ken, it's pretty boring. And he explained there's these 3 auto drive packages that you can get, and he had this, I think the mid-grade one. He said, so when I'm driving, I sit back, I put that in auto drive or whatever it's called, and rest my knee on the steering wheel and read a book or watch a movie. I was a little floored because to me, driving is it's a task that requires a lot of awareness and a lot of connection. And I'm not sure that I would trust the technology yet to protect not only myself, but the people around me. But even more importantly, I think, because it's one thing to be alive or dead, but it's another thing to be living, was in noticing that for him at least, here was a vehicle that, if you like driving, could be really fun to drive, but the technology had kind of taken the fun out of it for him. And this is important for me to think about. It's very easy for me to text our neighbors that live just over the hill. And that's the easy way to go. It's quick, it's efficient, it makes sense. Walking over that hill to text somebody, see how ingrained it is? Walking over that hill to connect to somebody, it's much more expensive in a way. But it also, of course, will hold gifts that I won't get when I text. Because on that walk, I'm going to hear birds. I'm going to see the sky. I'm going to breathe fresh air. The wind's going to be going through my hair. I might meet other people in our community on the way or see a cool animal. There's so many things that can happen when I take the slower route. So for me, there's going to be a continued examination of the role that technology plays in my life and what decisions I'm going to make as far as doing things the easier way or choosing a way that is slower but might hold more rewards. Okay, a second anecdote. And I'm not sure how some of you might feel about this because we're going into culturally inappropriate land here. But for me, it brought back memories of a different way that we used to do things. So I'll tell you the story. We were at this super small town gas station. And it was odd because gas had been about $3.69 a gallon everywhere we went. And we were going through this super small town, and here was gas for $3.09. The price was unusual, but we needed to fill up anyway. So we pulled in and stopped. And my friend that was with us was trying to fill up, but it wasn't taking his credit card. So he went in, and the woman that ran the place came out. So he went in, and the woman behind the register came out and helped him with his. So he went inside, and the woman behind the register came out and helped him with his credit card and made it work. I wasn't quite sure if she had been successful or not, so I stepped over to her as she was walking away from him and said, were you able to get that to work for him? And she said, "Oh yeah, I'm the queen of gasoline." And I said, "How is it?" And she was probably, I don't know, maybe in her mid-60s, just had this great smile on her face and seemed joyous. And I said, "How is it that the gasoline's so inexpensive here?" And she said, "Well, the guy that owns this place it's a small town, and he just wants to make sure that everything is affordable for people." She explained that he was also running for a state office and just had values of people, trying to be good and kind to people. And I exchanged a few more words with her, and then she started to walk away, and she put her hand and she slapped me in the butt as she said something a little saucy and walked into the gas station. And it struck me afterwards as I shared this little experience with my family that we have created a culture where there's so much that can be inappropriate that sometimes we don't know how to interact with people. She didn't do that to my neighbor. She and I had just a kind of fun, flirty exchange between us. And so I think it was a reading of two people, and then she created that little piece of connection that just would be seen as totally inappropriate in our world. It can be inappropriate in our world to hold open a door for someone. I still hold open a door if someone's walking in behind me. It can be a well-dressed woman. It can be a kid. It can be a huge biker guy in tattoos. It doesn't matter. But still, sometimes some people can even be offended that you're doing that for them. And I choose to do it because I think it's kind. And it's just an acknowledgement of, hey, you're coming in behind me. I'm not going to close the door in your face. And welcome them into wherever they're going with a smile. To me, I kind of wish there was more of that. I'm going to call it that flirty interaction in the world. Now, yes, it can get inappropriate. And it's probably a little different when it's in the reverse, I guess, in my mind, when it's a guy doing that to a woman. But in this case, hey, bud, it felt just right. Hi. And that connection left me with a smile that otherwise I wouldn't have had, and left my whole family with a smile. Maybe you see where I'm going with this. I think for me, there's got to be a continued examination of the relationships, the interactions that we have with people in this world. With our cultural norms being redefined as we go along in our world, it can be hard to keep up or know how to interact with other people. And I'd like to believe that instead of having hard and fast rules, we can interact with each person based on our feeling of connection with them. This is more complicated, but it engages us more. It means sometimes we might have to ask somebody. That has absolutely happened to me in the realm of hugs. So when I go up to somebody, my preferred greeting is a hug, but I always ask them now. And I just say, are you a hug person? And some people say, yeah, absolutely. Give you a hug back. Other people, no, they're uncomfortable with that. And that just takes a little extra engagement, just asking somebody. But by asking somebody, it opens up a door for more engagement. Another lesson was about trust. And I'm going to be sharing some footage of what's called a grotto. This is a religious phenomena. I'm not sure if this only happens in the United States, but you find these dotted here and there. They're built out of concrete, and then all these pieces of stone and glass are put into the concrete to create decorations. They're pretty gaudy looking in my opinion, but also fascinating in a way, because as you walk through it, you see all these amazing stones and minerals. As we walked through, Rebecca pointed out that some of these minerals, because we know our rocks pretty well, were worth hundreds, thousands, some tens of thousands of dollars. And they're just sitting outside, unguarded, in an open air area. And yet, there was no evidence ever that we saw of things being pried out of the walls or the decorations. We had another experience where we went down to a mine to mine for geodes. And it was a fun experience. We brought home some neat rocks. But afterwards, you go to pay for your geodes. And you go up to his office, which was this kind of junky building. And then he said, stop, and there's a blue truck there. Just open the door to the truck and leave your money. So we go up there, we do that, open the door. There's just wads of cash sitting there on the truck seat. Now, obviously, a whole bunch of people had been paying for their geodes. He didn't charge much at all, but still a lot of people coming through. And so this pile of cash there that people had been adding to, he wasn't there, no one was there. It would have been very easy to just pick all that up and go. And everybody was leaving the money and not taking it. I tend to be someone who believes that maybe our world could use less rules and regulations, and that people can be trusted. And those two experiences for me were just proof in the pudding that, yeah, people can have these things there, run a business that's based on trust, and it works. And this is despite the messaging that we might be getting from our media and other sources about human nature and how we should interact with each other. And most important little story I'll share, which really is the big lesson of this whole video for us, and is going to explain what I mean by the title of Eclipse Mind, is that sometimes we play a game. I think I put this game into Becoming Dungeon Master when I wrote that book. And the game has to do, maybe I just put it up on the website, I don't know, a video. So the game has to do with looking around in your world and trying to kind of render something, manifest something. We often do it driving. And so we'll say, let's try to render an elephant in our video game. And then we'll go along and see if, as we're driving, we see the word elephant, or we see a picture of an elephant, or we see an elephant. And it's a really fun game. Whether we're actually manifesting or rendering something is less important than how it gets us to look around at our world, to be more aware, to explore a little bit more. It's a super fun driving game. And usually it's oddly successful. I mean, we'll pick really outlandish things and then have them appear in very outlandish ways. This time, however, pretty early on the trip, we said, let's render a pomegranate. However that comes. It can be a word, it can be the fruit itself. And the whole trip, there was never a pomegranate. We got home, we were sitting out getting some sun and just looking around and loving the place we live. And Rebecca said, Kenton, can you go in and get one of the water bottles? I think you'll know which one that's sitting on the kitchen counter. We'll buy glass juice bottles. So we'll drink the juice and then we'll use those as water bottles on our adventures and trips. And I went in and I couldn't see which one she meant. She said I would recognize it, but I didn't. I was looking at the juice inside. One had a little juice, one had water, one had kind of juice mixed with water. So I just grabbed all three and I brought them out. And she had this kind of laughing smile on her face. Well, it turns out that one of those bottles that I was holding had on the front, of course, a pomegranate, because it had originally been pomegranate juice. And the four of us looked at each other and laughed and recognized that the thing we had been trying to render or manifest for that whole trip had been right there in our hands the whole time. Our mind didn't see it. Our eyes saw it, but our minds didn't see it. It was there, present in our lives, but we weren't present for it. So it didn't exist effectively. You see where I'm going? The eclipse is an event where you feel there. You are connected with the people around you. You're connected with nature. You're fully present in a way that maybe almost nothing else brings you fully present. And that presence is the essence of life. When we're there, we can experience it. It doesn't matter. I can be eating the best meal in the world. If my mind is elsewhere, I might as well just be eating white rice, because I won't taste that food. I won't be present for that food. I'm not experiencing it. This is hands down kind of the biggest decision we'll make in our lives, is will we be present for it? If we're not, then we'll feel like we're alive. We're just living our lives, but our life will just be graying by. It'll be just floating by without us ever even noticing it's there. When we're present for life, things are completely different. We taste our food. We see the people around us. We feel gratitude in every moment. That's the eclipse mind. The eclipse mind, when we're present for what's going on. Now that we're home, can we keep the eclipse mind? We experienced this coming back from Hawaii, coming back to this land that we love so much. The smells, the sights, the sounds. All of us have a life that we're living right now that we can ignore, or that we can just suck the marrow out of, that we can love. In a weird way, it doesn't matter where we are. I do not like driving. That's not where I like to be. But when I was driving, I was there with my family. Our friends were riding behind us. We were looking around and seeing parts of the world we hadn't seen before. And here I am right now. I'm sitting on these stones. I can feel the cold of the stone coming up through my bare feet. I can hear these birds calling all around me. There's lichens glowing on the stone. There's so much that is here, like that eclipse, present in this moment, that I will miss if I'm not open to it, if I'm not in love with life, if I'm not cultivating a mind state of being here with the experience that I'm having. And that is the eclipse mind, my friends. If you went and you saw the eclipse, you had a moment of that when you were fully present with this mind-blowing wonder of nature. Take that and bring it into your everyday life. If you didn't get to see the eclipse, no matter. It's the same thing. You have a choice right now. Will you be here present in this life that we're living together? Or will your mind be dwelling on tomorrow's problems, yesterday's regrets? This thinking mind, this is here as a tool, but it shouldn't be our default. Our default should be our senses, experiencing this. Bring in that mind to use for specific tasks, and then train our minds to come back into our senses, to appreciate thusness. My friends, thank you for being on this journey with me. Thank you for watching. And I really hope we can share some thoughts, some ideas, some inspiration down in the comments together. So much love to you all.